Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman, and this is Dissident Dispatch. Each week, I will bring you a dispatch of the topics and stories I think you should be paying attention to, close attention to, actually, if you want to understand the people and ideas most heavily influencing your child's education, not just in K-12, but higher education also. Sometimes a guest or two will join me. Often I will be by myself. But this is where I'm going to go through sort of like what's happening, what's going on. Sometimes it'll be one story, sometimes it'll be multiple stories, but that's what this is, kind of a dispatch, little rundown of what's going on and my perspective on it. If you're joining the show live and want to ask questions in the chat, please do. I will do my best to address as many of them as I can. I cannot promise I'll get to all of them, but I'll do my best. If you're watching the replay, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Tonight, we are going to cover the supposed, alleged fall of Ibram X Kendi, how our children are being treated sort of like dogs with a way of training them that you may not be aware of and you might not like. At least I hope you won't like it because you shouldn't like it. And cluster B classrooms. You've probably heard a lot lately in the last week about cluster B personality disorder, cluster B society. It's a new piece out by Chris Rufo. I strongly recommend it to you. We'll talk about it tonight. But you've probably heard a lot about cluster B. What you may not realize is how our classrooms are welcoming cluster B personalities and amplifying them, and then also creating more of them using your children. So you should be aware of that. Before we get started, though, tonight, I would like to ask you to please go ahead and click the like button for this broadcast and share with anyone else who might be interested. If you're not already a subscriber to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe, consider subscribing anyway, and hit the notification bell to be notified when I make new content. It won't go off constantly. I probably make content maybe 3-4 times a week max. So you won't be spammed to death. And finally, if you value the content that I produce, please consider supporting my work directly, either by becoming a paying member of my Substack, Locals, or this YouTube channel. And coming soon, I'll update you next week. I'm going to have a private Discord server that members can join. It's going to be very exciting. I will explain it further, but that is coming as well. So without further ado, let's get started with the show tonight. Thanks to everyone who's here so far. I'm so glad that you are. You have probably seen articles, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, that Ibram X Kendi has fallen from grace. Oh, finally, people are noticing that Ibram X Kendi isn't managing his money very well, etc. I am going to go through that. But first, in case you weren't aware what it was supposed to be doing, what his Center for Anti-Racist Research was supposed to be doing in the first place. You know, I'm sure you've heard they got a lot of money, especially after George Floyd and after he wrote his book and after all the BLM activity. They collected millions and millions of dollars. Plus, you know, I think the former head of Twitter gave him a bunch of money. Jack did. I think he's gotten money from other big name people. Lots of money flowing in there. But what were they really supposed to be doing that they maybe didn't do? So let's take a look at a Wall Street Journal article. What exactly happens at the Center for Anti-Racist Research? At least what was supposed to. A Boston Globe report raises troubling questions. Now, this is from September 21st. And they go into how there have been complaints from the workers there, which is probably what you've heard about. Here we have from the Boston Globe. Boston University announced Wednesday it would conduct an inquiry into Dr. Ibram X Kendi's Center for Anti-Racist Research after complaints emerged about the center's culture of financial management. So a lot of us were sitting there going, yay, they're finally catching on that this isn't such a great thing. The assessment comes a week after Kendi, a celebrity author, scholar of race, and anti-racism advocate laid off more than half the center staff. The complaints, a BU spokesperson said, focused on the center's culture and its grant management practices. The inquiry announced Wednesday represents a broadening of a previous examination of the center's grant management practices, according to the spokesperson, Rachel Lapal Cavalario. Sorry. Kendi takes strong exception to the allegations made in recent complaints and media reports. She said, yes, I have looked at his Twitter feed, and it's basically, it's a lynching. They hate me. It's the GOP. It's all the racists, what you would predict. They're trying to silence me. No one's trying to silence you, dude. So as I say, credit where credit's due. They're covering the story. That's awesome. But we're talking about now, there are professors who work for the center, and this guy Copeland resigned in June. His blunt comment on the record, coupled with the fact that he is a credentialed narrative expert, suggests trouble for Mr. Kendi. For if the latter can't rely on a friendly media narrative, what can he rely on? Another blunt comment on the record also doesn't help Mr. Kendi with the important task of narrative management. The Globe report continues. I don't know where the money is, said Saida Grundy, a BU professor who worked at the center from fall 2020 to spring 2021. In December 2021, Grundy sent an email to BU, provost, etc. So they're looking into the complaints. And, he says, let's also hope that Mr. Kendi will give the benefit of the doubt to America and her people rather than assuming the most successful multicultural society the world has ever known is systemically racist. Of course, he's not going to do that. He has said so in multiple books. So I hope that this author is giving us the benefit of the doubt that we are semi-intelligent and we think he's kidding. He must be kidding. He cannot be serious. The Journal's Jason Riley noted in November 2022, Boston University professor Ibram X Kendi, one of the most celebrated progressive thinkers in the country, openly supports racial discrimination. That's why I don't think he's giving anyone the benefit of the doubt anytime soon. And that it's as if a country with such overt discrimination would not be odious enough. The professor has also seemed ready to toss out blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but what were they supposed to be doing? This says what exactly happens. They don't answer. Even the Wall Street Journal, it doesn't tell us the center's mission, this blah, 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 blah. So then I went looking and I found this article. Ibram X Kendi's fall is a cautionary tale. So was his rise. Well, yeah, we knew his rise was a cautionary tale. But what about that fall? Even the article that's supposedly asking what exactly goes on there is only reporting on another report. It's just saying, hey, the Boston Globe is investigating. Bunch of people said some stuff. Let's see what happens. Where's the money, they're asking. But we don't really get into the meat of it. White American elites are always ready to turn a Black intellectual into a mouthpiece for their political agenda. This is not news. And then we go through this article where they talk about, how he, it's here. The prospect of Kendi's unraveling is not, or at least is not only the story of a huckster who is happy to cash in on America's racial trauma, slapping his name on strange children's books, including Anti-Racist Baby and Good Night Racism. Did you know that was a thing? Did you know Good Night Racism was a thing? Check it out. Yes, it is this book, which you can buy for $19 for your child. And this is the summary of this book. So they're correct. Strange books. National Book Award winning and New York Times bestselling author Ibram X Kendi. As children all over the world get ready for bed, the moon watches over them. Pretty sure it's just hanging out up in the heavens, but okay. The moon knows that when we sleep, we dream. The moon has a brain. Okie doke. Even Goodnight Moon didn't really anthropomorphize the moon. It didn't say the moon knows Jack. It just had the little kid saying goodnight moon, like, the little rabbit says goodnight moon, like goodnight to the light from the moon in the window that I'm now not going to see because my eyes are closing. It didn't say the moon knows anything, but okay, the moon knows things. And when we dream, we imagine what is possible and what the world can be. Not really. I just run through a weird mishmash movie of my day, plus some stuff that happened to me years ago, plus this never-ending fear that I'm going to be late somewhere, usually to a class I've forgotten to attend for 3 weeks and there's an exam tomorrow. I don't know why. I'm way past school and I still have this dream. But no, I really don't go to sleep and go, what could the world be? No, don't. And I'm pretty sure kids don't either. I mean, not inside their heads, but they have a limited range of imagining what the world could be, you know, covered in frosting and candy, maybe. With dynamic, imaginative art and poetic prose, Goodnight Racism delivers important messages about anti-racism, justice, and equality right before you go to sleep. Hey, little kid, you're about to go off to slumberland and dream of what the world could be. And let me tell you about racism and anti-racism and justice and equality in an easy to read format that empowers readers. Does it though? Does it empower them to do what? Have nightmares about how people are always going to be racist and that's never going to end, and the solution will be, you know, some more discrimination against the supposed racists, who we can assume by their skin color. Goodnight Racism gives children the language to dream of a better world and is the perfect book to add to their social justice toolkit. But Ibram X Kendi has told us many times there really isn't a perfect world. The perfect world is when every white person is beating the living daylights out of themselves, you know, self-flagellating, constantly apologizing and kissing the feet of non-white people. Because according to Ibram X Kendi, white people can never not be racist. But in the same breath, he'll tell you that it's not skin deep. He argues in absentia, of course, you know, like where Vivek is not actually there, but he has a debate with Vivek Ramaswamy about how racism is not skin deep, even though that's pretty much what Vivek said. But I'll show you that in a moment. So anyway, back to the supposed fall. The supposed fall. I couldn't find anything in here either about the fall. It's the books. It's the this. It's the where is this? He rose and he did this. And he, yeah, we've been here. We've seen all this. We know this. He rose precipitously as a celebrity in this racism, anti-racism space. And where's the fall part? I'm not seeing it. There's an investigation going on, but nothing else has happened. He's still, the university is standing behind him. His books are still selling like hotcakes and being, you know, distributed to schools left, right, and center. They are still on the resource list for every school there is, as far as what teachers should use to make an anti-racist classroom. Kids are still being assigned readings from Stamped. Stamped is now being made into a movie. So my message to you, dear audience, is I think the stories of his demise are greatly exaggerated. Greatly exaggerated. Nothing has actually happened. Nothing has happened. He's let go half the staff. Big whoop. His argument is, I really want to have the money last forever, for a really long time. So we need to cut some staff to stretch it out. As far as what they've produced, very little. Some op-ed pieces. You know, they were supposed to be doing research projects. How you research their made up nonsense, I don't know, but that's what the money was supposed to go to, is like researching all of this. He wants this center to be permanent at the university. No one is stopping him. The university is standing by him. They're not saying, you know what, unless you can cough up some financials that explain what it is you do here. I'm picturing the guys at Office Space. If you've seen that movie, where the consultants are sitting there like, so what is it exactly you'd say you do here? I'm not seeing it. Only unanswered questions, lots of articles, op-ed pieces, but something's strangely missing. And so then I went looking at, what is Mr. Kendi up to this week, or what's going on? How is he, you know, reacting, responding, etc.? And I see this is the Emancipator, which is reimagining the first abolitionist newspaper for a new day, exploring and explaining solutions to racial inequality. Okay, in and of itself, nothing wrong. The Emancipator was once an abolitionist newspaper. I'm pretty sure we've passed abolition, but let's continue. So here we have, calling all parents, teachers, and caregivers. Dr. Ibram X Kendi, author of How to Raise an Anti-Racist, is taking your questions on how to start the talk about race. Anyone want to ask whether you should start the talk, have the talk, even consider the talk? No, it's a given that parents are going to have the talk about race. Is this all parents? Just white parents? Just black parents? Both? But who is it? What questions do you have for him? Drop a comment below. So then somebody comes in to this and says, ask Ibram if he's come up with a better definition for racism yet, because his old one is a rambling circular mess. Now,
you talked to.
We're going to listen to that Because my point to you in all of this, all of my commentary is he hasn't fallen. That's why it's the alleged fall of Ibram X Kendi. He's not fallen, if only insofar as his influence is entrenched. It's not going anywhere, similar to the influence of Che Guevara. Okay. I mean, do you think we now know that Che was a pretty bad guy? Right. And yet his face is still painted on the side of schools or in the walls. How about Angela Davis? I mean, these are like actual murderers and criminals. This guy is just a professor we don't agree with. He's not killed anybody. He's not really done anything horrendously bad. They are really bad people, and they're teaching our kids about them, amongst others. After all, they've canonized George Floyd. Yes, he was murdered, and he did not deserve to be murdered, and I'm not suggesting as much, but the guy was not exactly squeaky clean as a person. So they're celebrating him. They're not just lamenting that there was a police murder of a black man. He is celebrated. So what I'm trying to say is, before you crow and think, oh yeah, isn't this great? They're finally going to investigate. No, nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen. He's not going anywhere. And if anything, this will be all, like in the past, no one will even be talking about it 5 minutes from now, and myself included. And the influence on your children is going to continue for decades, unless you put a stop to it by removing them from the schools, because they're not pulling it out of the schools anytime soon. So let's see. I'm going to play his lovely rambling definition of racism. If you have any difficulty hearing it, please let me know in the comments.
About the importance of defining racism.
All right, that isn't going to work because the audio is not coming from the right place. So hang on one second. This is, you're able to view the tab. It's sharing, but somehow the sound is coming out of the wrong place. Interesting. Were you guys able to hear that? Because I'll play it if you could hear it. Let me try this. Sharing the team. Okay, let's give it a shot. I hope this works.
But I unless I missed it, which is possible, I didn't hear your personal definition. Is there one that you would offer us? Like, how do you define racism?
Sure. So racism, I would define it as a collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. Sure. A collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by racist ideas. And anti-racism is pretty simple, using the same terms. Anti-racism is a collection of anti-racist policies leading to racial, anybody want to take a guess? Equity that are substantiated by anti-racist ideas.
What? Anyone want to translate? Like, what? the man is a professor. What? Celebrated author, celebrity, etc. This is where we are now, folks. And they're sitting there like, what a genius. Isn't he a scholar? I just no. So somebody says, what is Dr. Kendi's IQ score? I need to settle a bet with a friend. This is, so people are putting all these questions in. Then we go over to this. Today, he says he's launching his anti-racist classroom, a new series where he puts on his professor hat and breaks down race and racism. In this first episode, Dr. Kendi welcomes Vivek Ramaswamy. Today's lesson, race is not a genetic attribute. Now, as I said before, I want you to listen to what Vivek said, or he reads it, and then what he says in response. And tell me if it's remotely coherent. Am I missing something? Because again, here's the date, September 1st. This is after,
welcome to the anti-racist,
after supposedly the fall, or after people are starting to talk about it and complain about it, and he's being complained about. Does he look worried to you? Has anything happened to him? Nothing. and nothing's going to. But let's see what he has to say here.
Racist Classroom with Ibram X Kendi. This is a new series at The Emancipator in which I put on my professor's hat and welcome someone into my classroom. My first guest is Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Last week, he called me and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley modern grand wizards of the modern KKK at a campaign event in Iowa. After the event, reporters asked him to explain. Vivek said, "The fact that we're taught to see each other on the basis of our genetic attributes is something that would make the old wizards of the KKK proud. I think here's no better way to disempower someone in this country as a kid than to say that you can't get ahead because of the genetics that you're born with." Today's lesson for Vivek is race is not a genetic attribute, my brother. Race has no genetic or biological basis. When scientists map the human genome, they determine the genetic code of 5 individuals who identify as white, black, Asian, and Latinx. Scientists could not tell one race from another when looking at their genetic codes. Since then, scientists have found more genetic differences between individuals of the same races than between individuals of different races. Vivek, you would know this if you read any of my books, rather than Republican talking points with an out-of-context quote from How to Be an Anti-Racist. I actually have a chapter in that book named Biology on this topic. Though race doesn't exist, racism does. Racist ideas are the parents of race. Not identifying by race prevents humans from recognizing racism, like the latest tragedy of racist violence, that Jacksonville shooter who hated and murdered Black people. You know who felt proud about this modern day lynching? You know what group have expressed racist ideas of genetic attributes to justify their lynchings? Grand Wizards of the Ku Klux Klan.
Okay, so in his books, Ibram X Kendi says, and in all the anti-racist material that's taught in schools, they say that white people are racist, period. White people are racist because they're white. So then explain to me, how would it, a baby, he's actually has a book called Anti-Racist Baby. So he can't claim that this is strictly, no, he's talking about social constructs, because he is also on the record saying that babies are racist, that a white baby at 3 months of age, because it focuses faster on a caregiver that has white skin, which, by the way, that the study's been debunked. It doesn't do that. If typically your caregiver is the same race as you because it's your mom or your dad, and that's usually the same race, but not always. And so they had to throw out the study because they only did it with white babies. They didn't with black. It's not a good study, but he cites it when he writes Anti-Racist Baby to say that it's just in white people. White people are racist. We just have this in us. And that Black people can't be racist. They just can't. It's not possible. I'm going to actually jump ahead since we're on the Ibram X Kendi thing, and show you somebody who the lie to Ibram X Kendi. She's also going to come up in our talk about cluster B, but I'm going to finish off my talk about him with this, because he talks out of both sides. Now, in all of his books, he makes it abundantly clear that white people are by definition racist, and they always will be. He talks about ideas, but then he says babies don't have ideas. Babies don't have racist constructs in their head. So he can't make up his mind. He wants to locate racism in people with white skin. He wants to completely dislocate racism in people with Black or brown skin. And then he wants to tell off Vivek and say race has nothing to do with your biology. Well, then stop saying that white people are inherently racist from birth, because that's exactly what you're saying when you say that. But as I said, it doesn't matter. Nothing bad is going to happen to this guy. But let's take a look. Let's challenge his assumption. Here's this charming individual and what she has to say.
Niceness as a tool of white supremacy. Did you know that most white people have mastered the art of niceness? It's 100% fake, phony, and disingenuous. Let me explain. It's a conditional niceness based on how well you perform for, coddle, and pander to whiteness, white supremacy, and white people. Basically, as long as you don't make them feel uncomfortable, don't mention white supremacy culture, don't challenge them in any way, call them out on harmful behavior, or talk about racism, they'll perform this fake niceness for you. But as soon as you break the code of niceness, you better watch out. The white tears, harassment, abuse, defensiveness, name calling, threats, calling the police on you, and making false accusations against you, to name a few, will be thrown at you almost immediately. The problem is many white people have been taught to weaponize niceness as a tool of white.
I've been muting this so it doesn't echo, but I think I've made my point. I think I made my point. And she's just one of many, isn't she? She is just one of many. So what have we learned here? Basically, that nothing has really happened to Ibram X Kendi. He's still the same guy. He's still operating like, a professor. He's still selling his books. In fact, if we go back to if we go back to here, what you'll see if you scroll down is look at all these books. Okay. And on top of this, he just celebrated, I noticed on his Twitter, that his books have been translated into yet another language. So the influence that he has had on education, on children, on how our children are even being spoken to about race is enormous. It's enormous. It is incalculable. They could probably, in fact, let's pray they don't find that he's committed any kind of crime or done anything like, really wrong, because if anything happens to him, he will just be turned into yet another saint and he'll become a martyr. And, don't wish for it. Don't hope for it. It won't make any damn difference. This story is a giant nothing burger. That is my conclusion. So I wanted to come and talk to you about it because I don't want anyone taking their eye off the ball of this anti-racist nonsense, because it infuses everything else. At what I just showed you was also an example of somebody with clearly with narcissistic tendencies, heavy narcissistic. Well, this is what, have you noticed that white people, like, she's talking about all people who look a certain way, and with the camera on herself, just walking like, look at me, look at me, look at my face, look at me, look at me, look at me, listen to my opinion about all people who fit a certain description. That is not something a person would do who didn't have a cluster B personality disorder. So we'll get to that, but look how they go together. Look how they go together. And what does the anti-racist Ibram X Kendi ultimately want to do? Well, just like so many other people pursuing these SDG goals, whatever, he wants to modify our behavior, the dreams that he thinks the baby, notice it's a black baby, should be dreaming about with the better world, is a world filled with people whose behavior and thoughts have been modified so that they just see themselves as the oppressors that he believes they are, and then act accordingly, whatever that means. I guess hand over all their worldly possessions, which of course would satisfy the SDG people too, because that is ultimately what they want. So the next thing we're going to cover tonight feeds into that. It has to do with that. You've probably heard on my channel and elsewhere about SDG goals, Sustainable Development Goals. You have heard about SEL, Social and Emotional Learning. I've talked to you about how the two intersect, how the UNESCO and CASEL and the various other people behind SEL don't make any attempt to hide that. They're saying it out loud, that SEL is in part, or a big part, actually essential, they say, to realizing the SDG goals. And you've probably also been hearing lately in your schools, in conjunction with SEL sales pitches, something called PBIS. PBIS, and which is based on ABA, and we're going to talk about what those are. But I want to go back first to what it's all based on. It's all based on behaviorism. Have you heard of behaviorism? B.F. Skinner, studies of dogs, how are we going to train animals? He also worked with pigeons. B.F. Skinner, the sort of grand poobah of behaviorism, believed that you could change human behavior with reward and punishment and this kind of, that there were ways you could like, train people to behave differently using behaviorist ideas. I found this guy, and I think this is a brilliant thread. So I'm going to actually read it to you, because before I go into the details of this, I want to just throw it out there. Behaviorism is bunk unless you're training dogs or animals, in which case it works okay. But trying to apply it to human beings is absolutely insane. So let's go through this. It is important to investigate claims to intellectual fraud, but the larger fraud is the entire idea of a predictive science of human behavior, let alone one triggered by stimuli in the environment. Behavioral science is one in a long train of latter-day phrenologies. Phrenology is, is the study of like bumps in your brain. Okay. So there is a fraud investigation at Harvard, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, moving on. Humans are not susceptible to impersonal, mechanistic predictions because of the nature of their agency. I want to find this man and hug him. Please, parents, hear this, because you're going to be taught by your schools, by all the people pushing SEL, that humans are susceptible to mechanistic predictions, that we can predict human behavior, that we should predict human behavior, that we should have AI doing it for us, and that this will all be helpful. It'll be helpful to your child to find out what they need, and we'll be able to predict their next step, and then we'll be able to know what to do to prevent them from taking the wrong steps. And what you should hear there is, we have a certain set of behaviors we want your kid to do, and we don't want them to do the behaviors we don't want them to do. So we're going to try to predict. We're going to take surveys, gather data, we're going to observe them, we're going to, we're going to treat them like little lab rats. And then we're going to make predictions based on our observations and all their survey answers, which of course we're going to treat as the gospel, because everybody knows that children answer questions and surveys accurately, and teachers observing students are 100% accurate in concluding what someone's behavior means about what they feel. All completely accurate, I'm sure. We're going to feed it into a giant computer with AI and algorithms written by other humans who are so perfect, much more perfect than the little students in the class. And we're going to predict what they're going to do, so that we can put in place supports, which is a fancy word for, the appropriate limitations, roadblocks, punishments, rewards, etc., to train them to do what we want them to do, or more importantly, to think what we want them to think, and to feel what we want them to feel. Yes, it is exactly that sinister. So here he says, so when he says that we're not, because of the nature of our agency, that is fact. That is just observable reality. Human beings are not animals. We have agency. We can think, we can reason. Even little kids, well, they can't reason. They have free will. Remember free will? Yeah, B.F. Skinner thought it was a myth. So let's continue. The attempt at a mechanistic science of human behavior tends to collapse under its own weight. Oh, wait, I forgot to read this. In Aristotle's terms, humans have purposes, teloi, that override impersonal causes. They absolutely do. Even little kids, you can watch them, watch a group of little kids. They're on a mission. Each one of them is on a little mission to do what, they're trying to do, learn what they're trying to learn, etc. In Charles Taylor's term, humans are self-interpreting animals whose meanings guide action. You cannot create a universal singular meaning for all the children in a class, no matter how hard you try. And I'm sure if you polled all the teachers, they would have to admit they are not all motivated by the same meaning. Even if they're all woke, even if they all want to make the world a better place, I bet if you isolated them alone and asked them, what does that mean? What do you mean by better place? What kind of world do you envision? You'd probably, if you had 30 people, you get 30 slightly different answers. And if you ask them what they felt like their responsibility was to create that, you'd probably get 30 other different answers. And all these variables combine, and you're never going to get a unified whole. You're never going to. People are not lumps of clay. And even dogs, even animals, as much as you can train them to do certain things, you cannot override their temperament. Dog trainers will tell you all the time, certain breeds have certain temperaments, certain, even certain individual animals within a breed have different temperaments. Well, you think humans are less complex than dogs? All right. So now he says the attempt at mechanistic science of human behavior tends to collapse under its own weight. This goes for the many human sciences, neurological, behavioral, rational choice, etc. But Taylor also refuted the conceptual assumptions of behavioral paradigm in his 1964 dissertation. And yet, here we are. So do you really think Kendiism and anti-racism is going anywhere? No. Bad ideas have a tendency to linger around as long as there is government funding to pay for them to be propagated. So the way to fight that is stop funding them. But we're still doing that. We're doing this constantly. We've been doing it ongoing since forever. Now he says predictably unexplanatory, predictably irrational, the hidden forces that shape our decisions. You really can't make us do stuff. Then he says, the cadaver keeps coming back to life in different forms, a kind of zombie research program. Taylor says this is because what actually animates it is not empirical or philosophical plausibility, but an ethico-political stance, one of disengagement and control. Does that sound familiar? Disengagement and control. That sounds a whole lot like SDG. That sounds a whole lot like, what they're trying to do to have us disengage from our actual selves and engage with the collective. He says there was behaviorism and then behavioralism and then behavioral science and behavioral psychology and behavioral political science and behavioral economics. This is how the human comedy keeps perpetuating itself on down through the ages. Our folly is serious. Our seriousness is folly. Jason Blakely, wherever you are, I salute you. Fantastic thread. So that helps me lead into explaining what in the ever-loving F is going on with stuff with our schools. So let me go to, all right, what I was talking about with PBIS, in case you're wondering, like, well, what is PBIS? Here's a paper from PubMed Central. Notice this, there's actually an association, ABAI, the Association for Behavioral Analysis International. Oh, I get just chills thinking about it. School-wide PBIS, an example of applied behavioral analysis implemented at a scale of social importance. School-wide positive behavioral interventions, that's what PBIS stands for, positive behavioral interventions. Parents, when you see PBIS, that is dog training. Just, I want your, like Pavlov's dog. Okay. I want your response to be triggered. When you see PBIS, I want you to go, no. Okay. Because that is saying they call it positive so you won't notice. That's their little sales pitch. And they want you to believe that this is going to improve behavior in the schools. Anyone see that video from Flint, Michigan? Did you see that? Girl picks up a chair, throws it at the teacher's head. How things going with all the PBIS and the the ABA and the SEL and all the little alphabet soup that they're feeding your kids? All I hear from my parents, my whistleblowers, the people who contact me, my people, every day there's a fight. Every day there's a fight. And you know what's increasing? Girl fights. Girl fights are increasing like crazy. In fact, the majority of fights lately in many schools are girl on girl and girl on adult girl even, but tons of fights amongst females. So that is not typical at all. That is not typical. We think of, the sort of masculine male energy cooped up in a building all day, no way to get it out, not being outside, et cetera and so forth. Maybe they get in a fight, they get in a dispute, something happens, they duke it out. That's not really what's happening. There's a lot of fighting, physical fighting going on based on drama, based on emotional drama and turmoil. And you called me this and you said that, and I feel this and I feel that. Their feelings have been like, up here, and they're fighting like crazy. So PBS, it's an example of applied behavioral analysis implemented at a scale of social importance. In this paper, PBIS is defined and the contributions of behavior analysis in shaping both the content and implementations of PBIS are reviewed, specific lessons learned, etc. And it says it's focused on practical demonstrations of behavioral analysis in school, community work, and home context. One current example is the emergence of school-wide positive behavioral interventions as a framework for improving the academic and social outcomes for students. Now, I will confess to you, I haven't read the whole paper, but what they have tier 1 primary intervention, tier 2 plus tier 1 plus tier 2, etc. They have the different tiers. You'll probably hear about those in school. Here's as symbolized by the tier 1 level in figure 1. All students experience tier 1 behavior support. This level of support is not dependent on documented need. What that means is all the students will be surveyed. All the students will be observed. All the students will have at least one meeting or be on the radar of the school counselor or somebody analyzing their behavior. So it is, and then we get to tier 2, focuses on moderate intensity supports that address the most common needs of students with ongoing problem behavior. Tier 2 supports are added to tier 1. Students who benefit from additional structure, more overt and frequent antecedent prompts. Now, what's an antecedent prompt? That's when they're trying to motivate the student to behave better. They're trying to change their thought process before they behave. They'll talk about shifting mindsets. They'll talk about things like that. They're thinking to themselves, if we can change their thoughts and their feelings in advance, they'll behave better. Negating all the other meanings, all the other purposes that a kid has in a given day, all the other antecedents, all the worldview they might be getting from somewhere else, the internet, at home, whatever's going on, even their biology, the food they're eating, who knows? You're talking about millions upon millions of different combinations of inputs into a given child, and they're giving them antecedent prompts. And then at a higher rate of positive recognition. So let's say you have the kid who threw the chair. The kid is showing symptoms of being aggressive and violent. So the antecedent prompt might be like, now, you need to be calm when you go into class and don't be throwing chairs, and you're going to sit down and you're going to take a deep breath and count to 10 and whatever they are. They're going to give them these prompts. Like, that's going to negate everything else going on in this kid. Then when they don't screw up, they can praise. Like, that's going to help. So now the kid's like, I just have to not screw up, and I'm, the greatest thing since life. But then when they do screw up, they go to restorative justice. At least the Flint kid is being brought up on felony charges of assault. Thank goodness. But I mean, she could have killed her teacher. How about the trans-identified student who grabbed a student by the hair and dragged her to the ground and down the hall? We don't know what's happening to that kid. They say there are going to be assault charges. The family wants to press charges. But what kind of antecedent prompts did that kid get? And which antecedent prompts are going to take precedence? The one that say, take a deep breath, count to 10, do some meditation, blah, 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 don't misbehave. Or the one that says, if you are misgendered, it's violence. If somebody accidentally dead names you, it's violence. You're being attacked. It is hate to comment on your hair. Which lesson is gonna stand out? So this is it's folly to begin with, because it's not how we train people to behave. And then you've got all these other antecedent prompts that are coming in the lessons, like all white people are racist, black people can't be racist, trans people are victims all the time. Queer means you're automatically a victim, so identifies queer and everybody has to get out of your way, etc. And this other paper, this is also about the multi-tiered system of supports with focus on behavioral modification in elementary school, a systemic review. I keep waiting for one of these papers to come out and say, this shit doesn't work, except to make things worse. But they're doing it. They're doing it like crazy in schools. Multi-tiered system to create a common context of action among diverse school stakeholders, blah, blah, blah. These papers don't do much of anything to tell you it works, it doesn't work. They just tell you what it is. This is what it does. This is what it intends to do. This is what it purports to do. And you're supposed to take that on faith as though it does do it. It says that it will do this. Okay, does it? The effectiveness of the approaches and interventions, as well as the design of the different systems, can serve as a starting point for the development of further systems. And what if they're not effective? Look around. Do they seem effective to you? Do they seem effective to you? So I'm going to drop these here in the comments for my sciencey people, because maybe y'all can figure out what I'm missing. I don't purport to be an expert in science. What I do know is I observe children, and I observe the news, and I observe the number of fights. Oh, by the way, they're not reporting the number of fights officially, because they go to restorative justice and they don't actually suspend or punish anybody. So that when they don't write it up, they don't have to report it. So they're like, fights are down. Ask a parent. Ask any parent with a kid in school if fights are down. They'll tell you that's a load of crap. Fights are not down. So, this is that. Then we have, I want to talk to you a little bit about something that was written back in 2020, because what you may hear is that blah, blah, blah. I'm drawing a blank. Behaviorism, okay, and applied behavioral therapy, applied behavioral interventions, ABA, whatever, that these are helpful for autistic kids. One of the things that they did was, for a while, they said it's very helpful for kids who are on the spectrum to, help modify their behavior so they can be more socially, fit in. And as with SEL, where SEL said kids misbehave and they don't all have great parents, so we need SEL. And now they say, well, we need it for all the students because not everyone has you as a mom, Deb. As if, my kid doesn't have me as a mom. Meaning, like, I'm a good enough mom. I'm not the best mom that ever lived. I like to think I'm pretty good, but I'm sure my daughter would tell you I screw up plenty. So, or all my daughters would say that. But kids are pretty tough. They're pretty resilient and they're individuals. So I'd have to probably screw up pretty badly for them to need the school to come in and modify their behavior. That's not to say that there aren't kids who have those kind of parents, but we're doing it to all the children with SEL. And now they're taking the thing that was originally thought of as, well, maybe let's try this on the autistic kids. Okay. And here's this article. Very good article, actually. Autism and behaviorism. New research adds to an already compelling case against ABA. Wait, 2020? And we're doing it more. We're doubling and tripling down. When a common practice isn't necessary or useful, even under presumably optimal conditions, that would be one-on-one with a child who has already manifested a behavior problem. So you have a problem you're trying to modify. You have a behavior that you can look at. We're not predictive here. We're not saying, let's get in your thoughts and think about what behaviors might come from your thoughts and then put antecedents to prevent those thoughts so you won't have the behaviors that we already predict are going to come from those thoughts. How many of us have had a negative thought about, I want to punch that person, but we don't do it. Okay, do we need to be constantly have antecedent prompts to tell us not to do the thing we weren't ever going to act on because we have agency and we're not idiots? and how annoying would that be, by the way? How much might it actually cause us to think, maybe I am going to punch a thing. Anyway, but optimal conditions would be one-on-one and I already have a behavior I'm trying to modify. I see it. I've seen it repeatedly. I want to fix it. So it says, it's time to question whether that practice makes sense at all. Yes, I would say it's probably long past time to do that. For example, if teachers don't need to give grades, even in high school, and if eliminating grades clearly benefits their students, how can we justify grading younger children? So if it doesn't work in high school, why would you do it for the younger kids? If real research shows there's little or no benefit to assigning homework, even in math, which is the discipline that proponents assume makes the clearest case for its value, why would we keep assigning it in other subjects? So what they've done here is say, look, we're going to take a situation where, there's something we assume is, the optimal circumstance, like math homework seems necessary, but let's say research showed that it doesn't work. Let's say that it did. I'm not saying it does, and neither are they, but let's say that it showed it didn't really work, even in math. Would you keep doing it? Would you keep giving homework in math, even if the research said it doesn't work? You probably wouldn't. You'd seriously question it. At least you would hope the school would question it, right? And if it turns out that contrary to widespread assumptions, behavior modification techniques aren't supported by solid data. Please take note of that. Aren't supported by solid data. Even when used with autistic kids, why would we persist in manipulating anyone with positive reinforcement or negative for that matter? A rigorous new meta-analysis utterly debunks the claim that applied behavior analysis, ABA therapy, is the only intervention for children with autism that's evidence-based. In fact, it raises serious questions about whether ABA merits that description at all. Before exploring the new report, let's take a minute to consider what we know about rewards and positive reinforcement more generally. In 2018, I reviewed 2 decades of recent research for 25th anniversary of my book, Punished by Rewards. These studies strongly confirm the original findings. Carrots, like sticks, are not merely ineffective over the long haul, but often actively counterproductive at work, at school, and at home. And these negative effects are found across ages, genders, and cultural settings. As a rule, the more you reward people for doing something, the more they tend to lose interest in whatever they had to do to get the reward. And they often end up being less successful at a task they're completing than are people who weren't offered any reward for doing it. Even more damaging, according to the research, is an arrangement where people are offered a reward for doing something well. I could read this whole thing, but my point is they are using this stuff like crazy. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you something that I just found today from e-learning industry. Instructional strategies to implement operant conditioning. September 15th, 2023. To implement operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is what you do to your pet. Instructional design models. This article delves into the profound influence of behaviorism theory and operant conditioning on the contemporary education landscape. Behaviorism learning theory and operant conditioning, by leveraging the artful orchestration of stimuli, responses, and consequences, educators can cultivate a dynamic learning ecosystem that imparts knowledge and nurtures intrinsic motivation, active engagement, and enduring understanding. Lies. Straight up lies. Now, you in the audience might say, well, Deb, all you're doing is you're taking that first person's word for it and not this person's word for it. By all means, please go read the research for yourself. Look at, human behavior yourself, to think about your own life, think about what motivates you, look at your kids. You might even say, well, I don't know, I rewarded my kids once and they did a thing. Keep doing it. Keep rewarding them every single day. See how that works. As opposed to just having baseline expectations and then, moving on. Now you might say, well, isn't getting an A or a grade, a reward? But it's a reward they earned for their work, not for behavior per se. And if we reward people for doing things well above and beyond just you get an A, this merited an A. But you're like, yay! Oh my God, trophies for everybody. It's so amazing. Let's jump up and down. What if we noticed after the self-esteem movement where we praised and we awarded trophies for showing up and you were here and you participated and oh my God, aren't you amazing? You walked across the floor without tripping over yourself. Do we not now see some of the most apathetic, unmotivated, entitled young adults in history? You can't blame all that on tech. Yes, tech is not great and social media is terrible. But what does social media do? Social media is conditioning us. It is using operant conditioning to get us to click, click, dopamine, 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 dopamine. So how motivated are we to do anything without the constant dopamine, dopamine? Can you do that in a school? Can you do that when you're trying to get somebody to learn something hard, like math, reading, writing, spelling, things that they don't immediately want to do, like immediate gratification? Press the button, there's the kibble. Press the button, here's the kibble. So unless you're going to up the ante constantly, in which case you're going to have kids who go through withdrawal when they're not getting rewards, or you're going to severely punish people for stepping out of line, neither of which is going to really work very well in a school environment or any environment for that matter. You are working across purposes from your stated goals very badly. So what is behavioralism? It's a psychological theory. So maybe we shouldn't be using theories that have been debunked and, as far as education, that holds that human behavior can be understood and modified through observable and measurable actions. But it can't. Not in any case. That's a fancy way of saying, we've observed that we can manipulate people. Yes, you can. You can manipulate people. Has anything good ever come from manipulation? Manipulation is basically, lying to you or twisting you into doing something you would not have done on your own, would not have done by your own choice. Circumvents your free will or lies to you to go around your free will, twisting it into have your free will conform to what somebody else wants you to do. Propaganda does that, gaslighting does that, neurolinguistic programming does that. They're saying, hey, here's how to construct lesson plans to manipulate the kids in your class. But I have news for you. it doesn't improve learning. That's not how people learn. The only thing people learn from operant conditioning is how to do very specific tasks to either avoid pain or gain a reward. And that reward or that punishment will have to continue to be increased ad infinitum, or it will simply stop working and will work backwards. And this is why grades don't even matter anymore. This is why students stopped working even for grades. This is why they don't even care if they fail. This is why they've had to dumb things down and do grade inflation, because kids stopped even trying to get a C. So now a C is an A. This isn't by accident. This is what happens when you apply these principles. And so I got this article, if you're wondering, from this person's Facebook. Aaron Schroeder. Applied behavioral analysis, ABA, is the attempt to change a person's behaviors through the study and manipulation of observable antecedents and consequences. And this blog post explains why even modern ABA is more harmful than helpful. And yet they are doing it all over the place, like to a crazy degree, and bragging about it. Like, isn't it amazing? So we also have this thread from Anita. I think it's Hogue. I'm probably not pronouncing it properly. She covers this. Oh, I'm sorry. You can't see the tab. Anita, is it Hogue or Hogue? If somebody knows, feel free to tell me. She's, what parents don't mind is discipline, normal, do your work, teach or guide, obey rules. That is not what PBIS is. Besides the constant collection of behavioral psychological data, a system of Skinnerian techniques are used by reward and punishment that is embedded into subject areas. And this person says, I don't necessarily mind the idea of PBIS, but the tracking that goes along with it is concerning. No, it's way more than the tracking. It's way more than tracking. Is this from UNESCO? I'm sorry. I'm going to go back in a minute over your questions because I haven't been able to do that. And I promise after I get done with this, this one page, I will. A happy slave, a system of slavery so well designed that it does not breed revolt, is the real threat. B.F. Skinner. And then she wrote an article, a wake-up call for every family and church in the United States. This is deadly to the Republic. Your child is a commodity to fit into the New World Order. Yes, it's New World Order stuff. Skinner wanted to prove he could control nature, taught pigeons how to play ping pong. Entrenched belief in free will and moral autonomy of the individual, which Skinner called dignity, hinders the prospect of using scientific method to modify behavior beyond freedom and dignity. So here's the book. It says, a 1971 book by American psychologist B.F. Skinner. Skinner argues that entrenched belief in free will and the moral autonomy of the individual, which Skinner referred to as dignity, hinders the prospect of using scientific methods to modify behavior for the purpose of building a happier and better organized society. So even the guy that they hold up as the grand poobah of we should do this is saying you can't do it. Even he's saying you can't do it. They're digging him up as proof that what they're doing is right, and he never said that. Beyond freedom and dignity may be summarized as an attempt to promote Skinner's philosophy of science, the technology of human behavior, his conception of determinism, and what Skinner calls cultural engineering. So, let me rephrase. He's saying you can't do it because we have this thing called dignity and free will, and so it's entrenched. He didn't say you couldn't try to get rid of that. He said that's the thing that's hindering it. I don't think he was happy about it. I think he would like to make a better world using his methods. So he's not a hero, but they're just taking his baseline teachings and saying it can be done. And he's saying, no, it can't be done because you have this thing. Now, the people over at UNESCO and the people at Castle understand that perfectly well. The average teacher in a classroom doesn't know that. So what's happening is the people at Castle, the people at Second Step and all these things are putting together programs to hand to the teacher that are designed to undermine free will and dignity, designed to get rid of autonomy of the individual so that Skinner's science will work. But first, we have to do that. First, we have to break the brain in order to rebuild the brain. I don't even know if Skinner ever imagined the people doing this, but he definitely documented that that's what you would have to do because humans have this thing. I imagine he probably would have loved it. I don't know. I don't put words in his mouth, but that's the hindrance. Our hindrance is that thing. And if you were listening to the show I did with Christine Jones about the history of all of this education stuff, you would have heard her talk about how these different thinkers who influenced Dewey and so forth were quite frustrated by what they didn't know to call it that until Skinner, but they were quite frustrated by this, these pesky individuals making wrong choices. And they just kept thinking if they could just, teach them and train them the right way that they could fix it. So now I'm going to go over and I'm going to look at some of your questions because I've gone on talking for so long. So let's go back here. In particular, I want to start to look at the behaviorist stuff. I think the Kendi thing is kind of dead in the water. I think most of us probably agree nothing's going to happen to him. So here, Christine is here and she says, human beings are not animals. Contrast with Beria, psychopolitics, man is an animal. Exactly. Beria, Stalin's man, the one who said, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Man is an animal. Well, if you're not going to behave like the animal we want you to behave, we'll just throw you in jail or kill you. Okay. So when you start seeing human beings as animals, bad things happen. Then she also says political control, stimulus response. Exactly. They're not even hiding it anymore. Leave them kids alone, says PBIS is what most teachers don't know they should be pushing back against. Teachers wonder why things are out of control, but I'm sure Department of Ed and union heads have known all along it was the goal. Yes, I don't think they're upset about the behavior problems because I think what they're sort of hoping, people at the tippy top, I don't think the average Joe, is that it will drive people to beg for school choice. They'll get it. ESAs are a kind of universal basic income. I'm going to be publishing a show this week with Lynn Taylor where we talk about that. It is it's money you people like, well, I paid into it. Not that much. Okay. Most people, not that much. You're going to be getting this, account that the government's going to administer that's going to be like your cheese, your government cheese. And then you think you're going to go buy a better education, but you're really going to buy whatever the government says you can have at the private school and what they're going to credit and what they're going to, eventually regulate, because that's how it happens. Pretty soon the teachers unions, because teachers come right out of the same schools and everything, they're already working to try to unionize the private school teachers to pull them into their unions. They are going to pretty soon just swallow it whole, just like they did with the universities by virtue of the money. And what are you getting exactly? We're all going to be under the same roof, controlled by the same people. But what's going to get you out and begging for that is the violence, the lack of control, the what's going on, and they're not learning anything. So you run full tilt away from it into what? The arms, once again, of the state and state dependency. Here's your little savings account funded by John Q. taxpayer and so on. And it's a trap. It's not choice. It's not the free market. Now, that's not to say, please don't hear me saying that every single charter school is terrible or every single private school is terrible. No, there are some great schools. Ian Rowe's charter schools are phenomenal. I wish that he had the freedom to go open up a ton of them that were truly private, but without a government monopoly. So we would keep our own education dollars so we could go actually afford to send our kids to schools like he is creating. But as long as the government monopolizes the dollars and decides where they go and what the processes should be for people like Ian to get another charter, that he can open another building, and how many students can go, and what kind of set asides he needs to have for people of this income level and that income level, and what the lottery's got to look like. As long as government does that, you're ending up in the same exact place. So that's, I think, what they're trying to do, is get us to beg for an out so that they will it will do that. And then also, personally, I think PBIS makes them dumb down even more. If the kids, yes, absolutely. They're trying to anticipate what we're going to do. And then they use the surveys to further predict what the kid's going to do, how the kid feels. Understand that when your child gets a school climate survey, that survey about how they feel at school is fed into a computer that is running a bunch of little calculations and things to try to predict what your student, what the students at a certain grade, what students of a certain demographic are going to do next, what they're going, how they're going to behave. They're analyzing it, trying to figure out why things happen and what's going to happen next so that they can put in systems of support. But what are they really supporting? Are they really supporting the children to have a better school climate? Or are they just coming up with a massive data gathering scheme so that they can figure out how to push what buttons they need to push for political reasons so they can say, oh, look, fights, we need more money. Oh, look, the teachers are overburdened. We need more money. Oh, look, there are too many kids who are pushing back against this. We need to push back against their parents. How much can they do politically with this data to manipulate you, the parents? Is the incentive really there? Do they make money or do they gain power for having your kids get along better with each other? No, they do not. You're a captive audience. The money's gone. You're not getting it back because there's not a single politician out there who's saying, when I get elected, I'm going to shut all this down, literally down, meaning I'm going to nudge those governors to even change, to push for changes to their state constitution so that public school is not compulsory. Y'all still want to fund it with your tax dollars, whatever, but don't make it compulsory. This needs to happen. Somebody needs to advocate for it, but they're not doing that. They're just telling you they're going to come up with ways to fix everything. And every time they've said that, it's gotten worse. But you know what's gotten better? Their political position. They're being people in power. Lots and lots of power. So then let's see. We're going on to, okay, Talking Story says, my Viking white ancestors were enslaved for over 400 years, but I'm not living in the past regurgitating it. Exactly. Ego Brand says, my son is homeschooled, but his friends that are in public school tell him about the fights going on. It's constant. I hear about it constantly. Talking Story says, my autistic daughter did ABA for years until at school she started headbanging. When autistic learned to talk via spelling, they describe ABA as a cruel repetition and disrespect. Yes. Just because somebody is autistic does not mean, the way they treat these kids, especially the nonverbal kids, I want to hurt someone. What antecedent are you going to give me to stop me from wanting to do that? It's abuse. ABA is abuse. It's abuse. It's definitely abuse of kids who are not able to speak up for themselves and really, come home and say, Mom, Dad, they're abusing me. They're torturing me at school with this constant antecedent and reward and punishment, like you're a freaking dog. And yeah, operant conditioning on kids is really, really bad, Adrian. So then we have PBIS and MTSS are heavily promoted here. All the districts near me started maybe 2014. Specifically remember an incident in my child's school. It's never ending. Yes, Anita Hogue, is it Hogue? I'm probably saying it wrong, is one of the original whistleblowers. Absolutely. I encourage you to follow her. So, and then the data comes after the tweaked answers. They will also manipulate the data. So, this favors a society. Christine says this favors a society which operates more on the basis of gratification than on the basis of reason or responsibility. The Leipzig connection. Yes. It is the affective. Go back and listen to the talks that Christine gave on my channel last week. The affective learning model rather than cognitive. What is this? Are they trying to actually teach children how to think, be active thinkers? Not what to think, and what to do, but how to use their minds, how to engage their minds. Now, humans, it should be noted, are disinclined to think. And you might think, really? We are? Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to think. So we are already trying to find the path of least resistance, the shortest path between, what we want and how to get it. What's the quickest way to do that? Or what's the quickest way to avoid having something we don't want happen? We're geared to do that. That is somewhat of an instinct. Thinking is something we're endowed with the ability to do, but it does require some training, and it's similar to a muscle. It will atrophy and you won't be able to use it, or you will never learn how to use it if you don't practice. So we send our children to school ostensibly to learn how to use our brains, not just to fill them full of stuff, which is still important. We want them to learn things. We want it to be a knowledge-based curriculum, but to what end? Why have knowledge? To make decisions individually about our lives, about our behavior, about what we will want, what we don't want, maybe what we wanted when we had no knowledge, like a $20 minimum wage. I want it. I have no knowledge of economics, but I want it. Give it to me. Wah! That's like a toddler. Operant conditioning, you train that person to say it often. I say it. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. $20 minimum wage. Now, what if they had the knowledge that was going to probably put them out of work? because it will be automated and businesses will close down. The economy will get worse and they won't have a job at all. And there won't be anyone renting apartments because et cetera. I mean, it will just spiral out of control and be economic chaos. Minimum wage hurts poor people, but they don't have the knowledge. So the decision they make, the action they take based on that lack of knowledge, that ignorance, looks like one thing, not something else. So we want our children to learn how to use the knowledge to arrive at conclusions that actually do benefit them. And they need free will and agency to do that. You cannot possibly train a child always to make the best decision in every situation, because that would mean someone else would make the decision about what the best decision is all the time. Is that possible? Was that possible in the Soviet Union? Evidently not. So it's not possible, period. Every communist who ever lived tried it and it didn't work. There's no one group of, super brilliant people. You'll always know who they are and you'll always have them gathered in one place and they'll always be willing to do this task of just being the deciders for all humans. What is the best decision for them in a given situation? No, you teach your children as many things as you possibly can that will help them have background knowledge of the world and how the world actually is and operates, including economics. And then you teach them how to conceptualize, how to integrate that information into thoughts and decisions that will hopefully make sense. And it still won't always work. How many mistakes have you made? How many mistakes have I made? I like to think I'm a rational person. I was raised to think and be a very active thinker. And I've still made lots and lots and lots of mistakes. And that is life on planet Earth for human beings. But they're fighting this tooth and nail. So this is interesting. Parents of special ed students are rebelling against ABA at school, but ABA gets paid $130 an hour. Well, with that salary, it's no wonder they want to put more ABA people in the school and have them work on all the kids at all times. Veiled effort here now to get 4-day week by blaming buses, starting with taking away paid buses and schedule chains, or using Hegel stuff, I think, assume that leads to online school. Yeah, all of this is geared towards where can we funnel the kids into a place where we can gather even more data from them and we can corral them into a place where they're super controlled. So imagine this, a building with lots of cameras and lots of computers. Imagine that. Or maybe at home with one of the parents getting universal basic income so that everybody's a dependent of the state, or both. Choose which one. Let's see what else we got. Yes, big hedge fund in educational funding said funding is pouring into AI ed tech coming into classrooms, customized to each child, could take place at home or in a building. I did a live stream today on my locals for supporters. It's a supporter only live stream about ed tech for homeschooling, but it also, what I talked about applies to everybody. Poison. And yes, they are teaching them not to think. Quite literally. That is what they want to do. Of course, it will fail. They are not succeeding at teaching them not to think. They are just succeeding at teaching them very poor strategies for thinking. What is the shortest distance between me and what I want? How do I go about feeling the way I want to feel? And how can I hold everybody else accountable to help me feel the way I want to feel? Which leads me to the final topic of this evening's show, which of course is our wonderful Cluster B society and Cluster B classrooms. So as I mentioned, Chris Rufo wrote this great piece. Psychological dysfunction is now valorized and embedded in our institutions. We need to understand what we're dealing with. For those of you who are, may not be super familiar with personality disorders. I mean, I know it gets a lot of play. People talk about it all the time. But I thought it might be worthwhile. I don't know who this person, but I mean, I just liked the graphics. So it seems to be a nice cheat sheet to go through some types of cluster B personality disorders with you. We have antisocial personality disorder, a deeply ingrained and rigid dysfunctional thought process that focuses on social irresponsibility with exploitative, delinquent, and criminal behavior with no remorse. Borderline personality disorder. By the way, borderline apparently is present in roughly 65% of the mothers of children with gender dysphoria, or who express serious thoughts about wanting to be a different sex. Borderline personality disorder, emotion dysregulation, impulsivity, risk-taking behavior, irritability, feelings of emptiness, self-injury, and fear of abandonment, as well as unstable interpersonal relationships. Histrionic personality disorder, self-centeredness, attention-seeking behavior, overdramatic emotions, seductive and sexually provocative behaviors. Narcissistic personality disorder, a strong need for admiration, act as superior, and behave with grandiosity. They tend to exaggerate their achievements in front of others and have fantasies of unlimited success, power, and beauty. And that really oversimplifies it. And I tend to agree with some of the therapists lately who are saying they would prefer that narcissistic personality disorder be removed as a disorder because it can't be treated. The others, believe it or not, can be treated. They're difficult to treat, but they can be treated. Narcissistic personality cannot be treated. It is a personality trait. Now, many people have narcissistic tendencies at one time or another in their lives, or they're, it's like a scale. And where, let's say a politician is very high on that narcissistic scale, but you wouldn't necessarily say they have a disorder unless they're a certain orange person. Anyway.
Okay. I found this on the web for histrionic personality.
Siri thinks that I was talking to her. So, and then you'll have actors. Actors may or may not be as high on it as politicians, but they're not all evil, horrible people. You might not want to be in an interpersonal relationship, a romantic relationship with some of them, but they can be very creative. They can be, really entertaining, etc. But, one might say they're fairly self-centered because, I don't know, they're celebrities. Not all, but like I said, the type of person who seeks the limelight and seeks to be out there, you're going to sort of wonder if they're higher on the narcissistic scale. There are narcissistic people who do a lot of, good and produce a lot of things in the world that are desirable because they had that, belief that they were superior and they had something to offer. And as long as it's not pathological or coexisting with one of these other disorders, then, maybe it's not the end of the world. Whereas a person who has a narcissistic personality or is high on that scale and has these other things, or is rewarded constantly for demonstrating their narcissism, that's when it starts to become disordered thinking. That's where it starts to become their imperative. And it's not that they're particularly narcissistic, it's that they are now have a disordered way of thinking. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing. So I'm going to go back to Chris's piece. The cluster B society. There's a creeping sense that our society has turned upside down. Healthy debate is replaced by activist hysterics. Speech is declared violence. Violence is excused as speech. Masculinity is condemned as toxic, while men in dresses are celebrated in the public square. It feels as if we're in the midst of a society-wide mental breakdown. One might be tempted to laugh at these manifestations as the outbursts of a small but vocal minority, but the compromised health of our body politic is no trivial concern. A strange new pattern of psychological dysfunction has infiltrated all our institutions, from humdrum bureaucracies to the highest offices. Wherever we turn, that creeping feeling sets in. Our society is sick. Our institutions are out of balance. Our public life has been consumed by a cluster of disorders that appeal to our worst instincts and derange our most vital social functions. What happened? Why have old standards suddenly vanished in favor of narcissism, psychodrama, and moral theatrics, all in the name of care and harm avoidance or harm? If we have any hope of recovering our sanity, we must first understand what we are dealing with. So then he goes into various different periods of history, etc., like World War I and so forth. Today, we are witnessing the emergence of something new, the cluster B society. Like the culture of narcissism, our digital age has distinct psychological traits, heavily influenced by the rise of personal pathologies and the power of social media. For this generation, the cameras are always on. The audience is always watching, and the old narcissism is transformed into frenzy, moral theatrics, emotional volatility, self-indulgence, and outbursts of violence. Psychologists have captured the spirit of our modern culture in 4 specific psychopathologies that together make up cluster B. So we just went over those. It's no longer an individual matter, however, to be dealt with the privacy of an analyst's office. We are seeing it. Okay. Now, what does this have to do? And I encourage you to read this. There's a recent, I'm going to show you this little video, actually. I think that this is really important because this video, it's a viral CIA video for recruitment. And when you see what they're valorizing, you'll see what he's talking about.
Millennial who's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I am intersectional, but my existence is not a box-checking exercise. I am a walking declaration, a woman whose inflection does not rise at the end of her sentences, suggesting that a question has been asked. I did not sneak into CIA. My employment was not and is not the result of a fluke or slip through the cracks. I earned my way in, and I earned my way up the ranks of this organization. I am educated, qualified, and competent, and sometimes I struggle. I struggle feeling like I could do more, be more to my 2 sons, and I struggle leaving the office when I feel there's so much more to do. I used to struggle with imposter syndrome, but at 36, I refuse to internalize misguided patriarchal ideas of what a woman can or should be. I am tired of feeling like I'm supposed to apologize for the space I occupy rather than intoxicate people with my effort, my brilliance. I am proud of me, full stop. My parents left everything they knew.
I can't watch it anymore. I, me, I, I am brilliant. I am this, I am that, I'm the other. Look, I'm not saying you should walk around feeling lousy about yourself, but I think this emphasis on, she's in public service at the CIA and talking about I have generalized anxiety disorder and sometimes I have imposter syndrome and then I have this and I have that. When did it become okay to sort of air our dirty laundry and broadcast to the world our vulnerabilities like a badge? This is not healthy. So especially when you combine it with ABA. So you now have a classroom in which we are getting these prompts and people are being rewarded or punished and so forth. But what's happening? What are some of the rewards that the kids are seeing? Oh, I see what happens. If I'm intersectional and I have all these identity markers and I announce to the world that I have this and that and the other problem, I get celebrated. Good things happen to me. But you know what happens pretty quickly? The rainbow flag's not enough. The badge isn't enough. Having the Pride Day isn't enough. Now I need Pride Week. I need Pride what month? I need Pride Year. I need all the books to be about Pride. I need to pitch a fit when people aren't celebrating me and using my proper pronouns. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change my pronouns on the daily because I need the reward. It's not good enough anymore. So we're conditioning our children to seek the kind of praise that comes from this. In other words, to be highly narcissistic and seek external reward. And now it's turning out on like everyone else needs to celebrate me too, because it will never be enough. It will never be enough. So going back to Chris's piece again, then we had a Nebraska state senator. Instead of offering reasoned debate, she screamed for nearly 2 minutes. Let's take a look at this charming angel. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. We need trans people. We love trans people. Trans people belong here. 2 minutes of that. Nebraska. What? She's visibly distressed. That would be a classic example, by the way, of histrionic. That's how histrionic people behave. The intensity of her emotion, the public display of her emotion is out of line. Now, what happens when our children see this or see teachers behave this way or teachers celebrate this? What are they learning? They're literally in a cluster B environment. Because we know there are teachers who do this stuff too. So this is like just absolutely insane. I'm going to grab this from Bill. Bill Anderson says imposter syndrome is not a gendered thing. I see it far more among men than women, but that's non-dispositive of being a male thing either. By definition, you are who makes you feel as an imposter. Thank you for that. Yes, most of these disorders are not particularly gendered. I only mentioned the borderline mothers with the children who have gender dysphoria because that's something that was studied. And I think it tends to be the mother primarily who is leading the charge as far as the gender affirmation care. And so that might be why it was studied. That said, despite now knowing that, they're still not slowing down. So you've got mothers, 65% of the mothers have a personality disorder, likely borderline. And we're not questioning whether maybe there's some like Transhausen by proxy thing going on. That's not a real word, but you know what I mean. Whether there's something going on with the parents, devouring mother syndrome, whatever you might want to call it, we should be, because these kids are being abused. So there's another article by Heather McDonald talking about it. American college students find themselves in the midst of an unprecedented mental health crisis. According to University of Michigan's Healthy Minds study, more than 60% of college students meet the criteria for at least one mental health problem, a nearly 50% increase since 2013. This didn't occur in a vacuum. And no, it wasn't COVID. And no, it's not just social media either. Social media definitely contributes to this. There's no question about it. We're now, being inundated with these messages. And as I said, this dopamine reward system. And, there's always an audience, and a lot of people can become addicted to attention. But I genuinely believe one of the biggest contributing factors is what goes on in the classroom itself. The messaging of the critical theories, the messaging of the anti-racist, which tells you to focus on your immutable characteristics as being the essential, most important thing about you, intersectionality, gender theory, the stuff that's being spoon-fed to our kids as young as preschool. And then every year thereafter, and it has been going on now it's not just a couple years old, guys. This goes back to like 2014 at minimum. So you figure the kids who are now in college had this stuff in at least late elementary school, if not middle school, which is plenty, that's in enough time, because when you hit puberty is when, you start having major identity issues. And we used to let kids just go through that, figure it out on their own. Stumble trip, trial and error their way through it. There was some kids would be goths, some kids would be jocks, some kids would, whatever they would do. Now they're not even allowed to navigate puberty on their own. They're not even allowed to anticipate navigating puberty on their own because they're starting kindergarten talking about pronouns. So when you have adults interfering in your emotional development from the age of maybe 4, nothing good comes of this. If parents did it, we would call them something beyond hover parents. We would be horrified and say it was abusive for parents to be constantly meddling in what their children should feel and think at every moment, every day, and checking their temperature about how they feel constantly about everything, never mind implanting thoughts and feelings into them about what they should accept, what they should agree with, what they should tolerate, etc. Oh, this is interesting. I'm sorry, Bill. Bill said, just for clarity, my comment was aimed at the video where she says she won't feel an imposter due to the patriarchy. I fully agree with your comment. Okay. So yeah, you're right. She did mention the patriarchy in a CIA video. I where to begin? Anyway, so I titled this segment Cluster Classroom because I think it's both. They are, if they come in, as all children do, self-absorbed, because you're a child. That's what happens. You're a little kid. You're like, the world is me, right? What my perspective is the only one, isn't it? But rather than being disabused of that notion, which is what proper socialization is supposed to do, gently, we don't hit them over the head with, you're not the center of the universe. But the opposite is happening. You are the center of the universe. What are your unique and specific pronouns? Tell us. And then we all have to comply. And if you want to change them tomorrow, we have to comply again. And if you want to change them the next day, we have to comply some more. What power you have, little 6-year-old. What message are you getting right away? And when teacher stands at the front of the room and says, or raps their door with, my pronouns are Zer. and you will do this, and I am this, and I am that. And suddenly it's all about them, the personality, them, the individual, unique, strange person, about their private sense of themselves. Like, honestly, I didn't even know half of my teachers' first names. The idea that I could get inside their head and crawl around in their likes and dislikes about, what their sexual preferences were and whether they saw how they felt about their genitalia, which is essentially what they're saying when they change their pronouns. I'm so glad I did not know that. And I really would never want to know that. That is creepy and weird. But if you teach that to a child before they really develop that natural sense of that's creepy and weird, teacher, and they start to see it as normal, well, if teacher can do it, then I can do it. If it's okay for a teacher, it's okay for me to be, focused on my genitalia and want everyone else to be focused on how I feel about my genitalia. And that feeling is a reality now. And my delusions of grandeur are grandeur. So you see what I'm saying? It starts in the classroom. It can be with a personality disorder teacher, or it can just be a teacher teaching personality disorder to the children. They're teaching cognitive distortion. They're teaching be on heightened alert for microaggressions, that people mean you harm when they make mistakes. Anticipate behaviors that you might do to hurt other people. Oh my goodness. So you're negative self-obsessed about what you might do to hurt other people, and then you're self-obsessed about other people doing things to you. And what in the world becomes of that? At a minimum, best case, you have anxiety. That's best case. Worst case, you've seen it. That woman standing there at the podium like, we need trans people, we need trans people. That's what you get, worst case scenario. So then let's see. We had those two charming individuals. Let's go on some more examples of the cluster B stuff. Let's see what I've got here. Yeah, this one I saw the other day and oh, wow. Okay, so this is a trans person, I guess.
Let's break down what transphobia is, because a lot of people seem to think that transphobia is just the idea of being afraid of trans people. A phobia can also be an aversion to something. So if you don't want to be around, like date or whatever, trans people solely because they are trans, you have an aversion to them being trans, which is a phobia. To be transphobic doesn't mean that you have to be hateful, aggressive in any way. It just means that you are averting yourself from those people. So the next time you may sit there and say to yourself, I'm not transphobic, I just don't think trans people exist. I'll be nice to trans people, I just don't believe in their cause. I'm not going to bully someone who is trans, but I'm also not going to promote their cause.
We could go on, but what is this person doing? They're saying the next time you think this, think that, this is what you feel. This is what you think. This is what it means. By the way, I've redefined the word phobia to serve my purposes because, that's what I needed to do so that I could teach you all a lesson about how you need to treat me and people like me. You aren't allowed freedom of association without being deemed some kind of phobic person. And now that somebody who is transphobic is actually considered to be violent or evil, well, my goodness, this person gets to declare what you are based on how he feels. If you don't date if you won't date them, you're transphobic. I mean, just let that sink in for a second, what that means. Happy anniversary, Bill. Did not just see that. Happy 23rd anniversary. And I really appreciate you coming. Thank you so very much. So that's a classic example. Absolutely classic. Now, you have to know that people like this are in school with your kids. By the time they're in high school, there are people in their classrooms, their fellow students who are like this. They absolutely have teachers like this. Now, I shouldn't say your specific child. You know your kid's school and you know what's going on, and hopefully you pay close attention and you monitor this kind of thing, but pay close attention. And that also is not to say that your kid, it's not so contagious that like, because this person's there, your kid's going to develop a personality disorder. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you're marinating in that kind of an environment, nothing good comes of that. Even a kid who is really strong, resilient, self-aware, self-actualized, like understands like that this is not okay, is probably wondering, why do I have to be here? And is this the way the world is now? Am I a prisoner of these kind of crazy people? I mean, just think how you feel as an adult, where you have some self-selection process. So you're not cooped up in a building 8 hours a day for 9 months out of the year with 2 or 3 people in your midst constantly, or demands made on you by cluster B people. You might even have somebody at work who's cluster B, but you probably cut them a wide, like, or look for another job if they're your boss. But how frustrating is it for you as an adult? How frustrating is it to just be on the internet, on Twitter with these people? Or if you've ever been targeted by one of these people for, hate and doxing or anything like that, cancellation, how incredibly frustrating it can be. So your child could just become the target of one of these people. So this is pretty serious. This is going on. And then those people, because they are celebrated and elevated to be, the center of attention, getting the most reward, the message to the kids who are not behaving this way is, you've got 2 choices, kid. Make way for these people and you won't get hurt, or behave just like them and you might get rewarded. Thank you, ABA. So that's how that works. And then finally, I wanted to talk about how this intersects. I hate to use the term intersect or intersectionality, but I see connections, just like I saw the anti-racism connection in Ibram X Kendi's narcissism and sense of self-importance, and how, like, hey, Vivek, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, you literally have said that all white people are racist. So you do believe it's in our biology. So whether it's the anti-racist stuff, connecting to the cluster B, connecting to the let's all modify everybody's behavior so they stop being racist the way I want them to, let's get everybody to behave the way we want, whether it's SDG or Kendi or whatever, this is all connected. And now I'm going to show you something that I just wanted to share with people because I happen to agree with it. This is from Paul Buckingham. Don't know who this is. There needs to be a version of this for every country in the world that lied and shows all of the liars in those countries. It needs to be constant, widespread, and relentless. Too many are conveniently forgetful, just like they fail in the lest they forget test. Hit hard. So this is a compilation of people. Now it's talking about the unvaccinated, but I see it in the context of the cluster B conversation, because every single person you will see, in my personal opinion, has a personality disorder. At the very least, is highly narcissistic. That they could say these things, and you can say, well, they were paid to say it, but I'm sorry. There is no amount of money in this world that would get me to demonize my fellow human beings in this way. And when you then these are adults, they started acting like this as adults. Don Lemon is a classic example of somebody who actually once upon a time, every so often, made a little sense here and there. Let's go back, let's say 10, 15 years. And now sounds like a cultist. So what happens is, when this kind of cluster B thing is combined with ABA, is combined with, the type of pressure that is put on people with through the, the anti-racist struggle sessions and so forth, you get this kind of thing, and it's extraordinarily dangerous. So I'm going to play this. I'm going to mute myself and play this. We cannot let this be forgotten.
Chips are down. These civilized people, they'll eat each other.
You are the unvaccinated. You are the problem. It is the unvaccinated who are the problem, period, end of story.
The only people that you can blame, this isn't shaming, this is the truth. Maybe they should be shamed, are the unvaccinated.
It's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks.
Anyone you came into contact with will blame you, as will the rest of us who have done the right thing by getting vaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
I think it's time to get our moral house in order, Anderson. It's the unvaccinated who are the threat.
All those vaccinated folks are going to start wearing masks to protect the unvaccinated folks. It's called
a Christian value.
You're basically punishing the vaccinated for the sins of the unvaccinated.
People are not behaving honorably. The unvaccinated are basically saying, well, it's open season for me. I can do whatever I want as well.
The unvaccinated are basically beating their breasts, running around the country saying, we don't care, we're living free, and so forth.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
The unvaccinated, a group that includes children and people acting like children. And the rest of us are starting to get pissed off.
The vaccinated feel the unvaccinated are making me upset or angry.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
Well, my freedom is being kind of disturbed here. No, screw your freedom.
The other day, Howard Stern weighed in with a much different approach. Take a look.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? Their freedom.
But you're treading on our freedom and you're making other people sick, and really you're killing other people.
The anti-vaxxers, they seem to have a thing for death and home remedies.
The anti-maskers turned anti-vaxxers are not just putting their own lives at risk. If that was the issue, we could just say that we can watch them compete to win place or show in the Darwin Awards.
We have to start doing things for the greater good of society and not for idiots who think that they can do their own research.
And don't get me started on the lunatics who won't take any of the COVID vaccines.
Life is too short to be an ass. Life is way too short to be ignorant of the promise of something that is helping people worldwide.
Maybe you're doing it because you're disconnected or disorganized. Maybe you have some sympathetic psychological reasons. But maybe you're just being antisocial.
Oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly. Yes, they are.
Those who are not vaccinated will end up paying the price.
The unvaccinated should be taxed. They should pay more for health care.
We need to start looking at the choice to remain unvaccinated the same as we look at driving while intoxicated.
We're going to see, and I've said, almost two types of America.
Dr. Fauci said that if hospitals get any more overcrowded, they're going to have to make some very tough choices about who gets an ICU bed. That choice doesn't seem so tough to me. Vaccinated person having a heart attack, yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy.
Pointing back to the unvaccinated who are really creating a problem in this country, every death that we are seeing from COVID could have been prevented.
Literally, the only people dying are the unvaccinated. And for those of you spreading misinformation, shame on you. Shame on you.
So, when we celebrate this kind of you will think the way I think or else mentality, you will do my bidding, my thoughts and my feelings are all that matter, that is what you get. That right there, everything you just saw is a compilation of cluster B behaviors in one little medley. It is absolutely despicable and scary. And as I said, they're adults. They are adults. And, I said, some people go into being celebrities or they go into, media, whatever, probably higher than average on the narcissistic scale, but that's off the charts. And I don't know that they were all always that way. You can be encouraged. We know for a fact that every despot who ever lived encouraged those kinds of thoughts and behaviors. And that is what's happening in our schools right now with the methods that are being used. If you have not yet seen, actually, there's one more thing I want to show you. And then I'll mention Lisa's fantastic video, Lisa Logan. All right, so this is Stephanie Wynn, and she says, this is how you instill cluster B personality traits in an entire generation. A concerned parent wrote, my 8-year-old had a lesson on emotional abuse at school today. 8-year-old. She said the example slide just had an adult that raised their voice. And she felt like it was weird to call that abuse because sometimes it's okay for adults to raise their voice. Isn't SEL just the best? And then there are other, comments. And then somebody's asked, about the teacher. Is she childless? I'm not sure. It was the counselor that taught the seminar. School counselors teaching 8-year-olds. My daughter mentioned every time you yell, you always make up. It seems weird to call that abuse. I guess I'm glad my kid gets it, but it's weird. They're promoting the idea of yelling equals emotional abuse to kids as young as 5. And then we wonder why there are kids who are saying, my parents are abusing me. Maybe they raised their voice. My goodness, my parents raised their voice to me. I didn't die. It's what they're saying, I think, that would be the issue, not the volume. I do agree they're trying to create family strife. They're creating division within families. Now, why would you do that? What kind of people want to separate people from their nearest and dearest, their closest family, their actual support system? Well, you have cults that want to do that, but you also have manipulators of all kinds. You don't have to be a literal cult. It can just be somebody who is trying to change your thoughts and behavior away from the way you might be inclined to behave. Now, even if we assume that there's the combination of nature and nurture. So your family can't control what you think or do any more than your school can. You're still more likely to align with your family members than with your teacher. So if we can separate you from your family members and cut you off from that source of support so that you have no other choice but to rely on the school and your peers, we have a greater likelihood we're going to be able to successfully get you thinking our way rather than their way. We're not in competition anymore. And by the way, that is something that narcissists do in relationships. And actually, most cluster B personalities, when they form pair bonds or relationship bonds, friendships, but mostly romantic relationships, mostly the close relationships, they love bomb you, which is what the school's doing. You're amazing. Oh my God. And then the more sort of insecure and awkward you are, the more they love bomb you. Oh my God. Oh my God, you're amazing. And then because you're in an environment where the other kids might not love bomb you. So the teacher's going to do that to make up for that. But all kids get love bombed. And then after that, there's a process of devaluation, gradual, slow, sporadic. So you can't predict it. Devaluation. We give you a negative stimulus, something about you. So you're white. So, oh, well, you're black. So you're oppressed. And that's very destabilizing. Or we tell you that you might not actually be the sex that you were, quote, assigned at birth. That's destabilizing too. But then we rush in with a solution. I feel better again. I'm loved again. It's all okay again. And this goes on until you become so bonded with these people, you start to think like them. You start to ape them. You start to copy them. You start to do whatever you need to do to be in their good graces or just stay completely quiet and invisible because you don't want to be in their bad graces. And that is how Cluster B classroom works. It is really sad. It is really terrifying. I do want to point you, however, to something that I want you guys to all, I posted it to my Twitter and my Facebook, and I want to make sure that you all go read it, watch the videos associated. Lisa Logan, if you do not follow her, put together an absolutely phenomenal thread this week about something called ISG. IDG, not ISG, IDG. IDG is the companion to SDG, inner development goals. Inner development goals. Play the first segment so you can hear.
The inner development goals show what inner shifts or human growth needs to happen in order for us to increase our chances of reaching the sustainable development goals collectively.
We need to sort of focus more inwards, and what is my responsibility in that? What can I contribute to a development that is more sustainable? But in order to be able to reach those sustainability goals, we need to also be able to take the right decisions to get there.
Mental health and well-being is supported by our inner capacities for spirituality and faith, where education is fundamentally oriented towards meaning and purpose in a changing world. rather than mere content delivery for students.
I realize more and more that we cannot reach the sustainability goals if we do not work with our inner development. This does not apply only to universities. This applies to all sectors, all ages.
What we really need is a deliberately developmental society. And depending on how severe you think the situation is, maybe we need a deliberately developmental world. And right now, we're not even talking about at scale the inner dimensions and how we need to change. Because at the core, we are the problem. The way that we're acting in the world and the way that we are solving problems is the problem.
I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation.
They're telling you. They're telling you why they're doing it. Why they're doing it. Why the ABA? Why the letting loose of these crazy people? Because they want to have your children focus outward on what is my responsibility? What do I need to do for these sustainable development goals? What do I need to do to make a better world? A better world. Not just, me, what I need. That's selfish. How selfish. So I've said it before on this channel, and I'll say it probably another 1,000 times. But the simple fact is, the system of education in America is currently working on a completely different project than you are as a parent. When you had kids and you thought, I want them to be educated, because what parent wouldn't? You didn't say, I want them to go to school. You said, I want them to be educated. I need to educate them. That is my responsibility. You probably imagined knowledge transfer, skill development, and that you personally and your partner or spouse and family members and everybody else, the little mini culture within your home, would transmit your culture, your values, your beliefs to your child, and share what I'm sure you think are great about them. Otherwise, you wouldn't hold them with your children, and that they would just reproduce that. They would reproduce that culture and those values, and then they would go on and go forth and prosper and use the knowledge and the skills and hopefully the, character that you would impart to them to live a good life. Their life by their choice. I don't think you imagined they would be plugged into the matrix. I don't think you saw yourself as a breeder. I don't think you saw yourself as producing cannon fodder for a revolution or a development agent for Klaus Schwab's wet dream of one world government and, the elite running everything and telling everyone how they should live. And you probably never imagined that what is very much like a dystopian novel or horror movie would ever come to pass, like would ever be real, that there would be people sitting around saying, we're the problem. We need to change how we think and act, and as en masse, collectively. So in other words, not just, people should think about conservation and maybe using a little less water. Okay, fine. But they're talking about at every level, taking steps using behaviorism, behavior modification techniques, neurolinguistic programming, manipulation, propaganda, false scarcity. I'm sorry, we're closing down those farms so you cannot produce meat anymore. Eat bugs. To coerce us into abandoning free will and agency. In other words, our dignity. And I just thought y'all should know. But Lisa's done a much better job of exploring this. So please go check out that thread. I'm going to put the link to the thread specifically right here in the chat. It's so disturbing. The video, she did an entire video breakdown of it, which I'll also get you. And that is here. She did an absolutely masterful job on this video. on YouTube, where she breaks down the whole thing, explains with slides and everything. It's just brilliantly done. This is something that Lisa's really done a fabulous job on with the research and the presentation. So please do go give it a watch, share it with everyone. It's got 343 views so far. It needs to have like quintuple that by tomorrow. I mean, that everybody needs to understand what's really going on. And there's no way to get around it anymore, guys. We can't say, well, maybe not in my school. This goes all the way. Just go right now and look up the United States Department of Education, and you will see UNESCO SDG goals. Just go look there. Look, United States Department of Education SDG goals. Look up their, reimagining education. You'll see it. So yeah, it's a lot. I really thank you guys for listening and coming to the show. I hope you got something out of it, and will share it with others. I will be back next week with another show. And as I said, I'm going to be publishing something from Lynn Taylor on UBI and childhood in the next couple of days. So look out for that. Once again, please consider subscribing if you're not already a subscriber. And if you wouldn't mind considering some support, I would appreciate it. It makes this work possible. I did, as I mentioned to a lot of people, I did recently quit my job, voluntarily separated from my position. We had pretty significant philosophical differences. You can guess what some of them were. And by the way, ed tech was on that list. So I just couldn't, I'm that kind of person. And, but that said, it does take, time and money to put this all together. So if you are of a mind or inclined to support one of the many ways that I make available, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for that. So that's it for tonight. And I will see you guys next week for another Dissident Dispatch. Thank you, Adrian. You're the best. Thank you guys. And like I said, I'll see you next week. Go watch the Side Chat Saturday that Adrian and I did. Go to Sophia. It's an awesome show. I'm serious. It's long, but it's like it was really, really good. And it's in a similar vein. Like there's a lot of important stuff in there. So go watch it. It was a great conversation about physics educators and the crazy kooky stuff that's going on there. All right. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.